We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
What's been happening in the realms of liberty and the Constitution? And is the US Constitution on firm ground this week amid seemingly endless attacks? Well, we're joined once again by host of the excellent Uprising podcast and constitutional attorney, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, to find out. Welcome back to the show, Scott.
Thank you, Mark. It's always a pleasure.
So, Scott, first, I want to start with this story. Oberlin College, Ohio. The appeals court has just affirmed that it's got to pay out $33 million to Gibson's Bakery for basically trying to destroy their business because of wokeness. Give us the details.
In the face of a shoplifting allegation for one of their students, instead of just letting the facts play out because of the races involved, the alleged shoplifters, and really not alleged anymore, they pled guilty, are black and the shopkeepers are white. This sort of general store in Oberlin College, Ohio, that served the university students, faculty, et cetera, was basically made to be the sine qua non of racist behavior against people by these school administrators who not only created flyers that alleged that Gibson's was currently racist and had a long history of racism, none of which was borne out by any evidence, and also encouraged those students to shop elsewhere, and then canceled university contracts with that store for baked goods and other items. So they basically tried to destroy this family-run store on the false notion that they were racially discriminating against shoppers.
Or shoplifters, in this case.
Well, according to the Oberlin College and
according to the
administrators, they would say it was against shoppers. But the evidence did bear out that they were shoplifting, Mark. Those three students, the kind of person who actually had the wine bottles in his clothing, and his two Confederates who beat the Gibson's clerk when he tried to restrain that shoplifter for police, they all pled guilty, those three folks. And also in their guilty plea announced that there was no racial animus that motivated the Gibson's store. But that, again, that wasn't, that doesn't sell many, widgets in the woke world for the college administrators.
So they have to pay out, Oberlin College has to pay out $33 million. I believe that's $25 million in damages and $6 million in fees or fines.
That's exactly right. The original lower court order was for even more than that. I think it was for over $40 million. $40
million, yeah.
And that was reduced. A lot of states have reduction implementation for sort of, I don't want to use the word, I was going to use the word wild, and I talked myself off, but really huge awards that aren't necessarily commensurate with obvious damage. So in any case, it was reduced to $25 million. And the reason why this is news now is because of this appeals court ruling, which looks like they're actually going to have to pay this. It could go to the Ohio Supreme Court, but it's unlikely because no novel presentation of a legal issue is ongoing with the case. So it looks like they're really going to have to pay. And this, I think, Mark, and sort of another reason why it's very important, not just that dollar figure, what it says to other colleges and universities. We better watch our backs if we're going to jump on this woke train. We better watch what we say, because if we defame these people, it might come back to haunt us.
Now, that actually brings me on to two quick follow-up questions on this. Number one, who actually pays? The institution?
Yes, Mark, the institution will pay. The administrators are already on to other and more advanced positions in higher education.
And secondly, do you think this will actually calm down the exaggerated wokeness and hysteria that so often accompanies higher education in America nowadays?
Well, one data point is maybe not enough to do it. I hope that it is, and it will be in certain circumstances, but maybe not broadly, but maybe one or three will, So we're getting the ball rolling here. And I think that's a healthy thing for college administrators to see.
Another issue I wanted to talk about, Scott, was this week that Joe Biden announced not only his new nominee for the ATF, but also more restrictions on what he terms and what many people term ghost guns. Give us the skinny.
These are restrictions, Mark, that candidate Joe Biden declared were not appropriate for a president to implement without an act of Congress. So it's funny. He actually admonished Kamala Harris when she suggested that the president act without congressional action on rules like this. He said something like, "Come on, we've got a constitution," which, I'll just leave that
He,
there
he
on
appears
the
to have
plate.
forgotten that the United States has such a wonderful document.
But apparently, once you're in power, the temptation to just use your pen, like Barack Obama famously said, to just redraft some rules, was just too much for him. And so what they've done is they've changed the rules on how an American may lawfully construct a homemade firearm. As it used to be, they could buy what was called an 80% blank, which was basically a block of metal machined to 80% of the final and finished product that would be needed to be a handgun or firearm part, rather. And this legislation basically says those transactions are now going to be treated like a regular firearm transaction, requiring a full background check, et cetera. But Cody Wilson of Distributed Defense, he's a person who's often been a kind of raconteur in the face of ATF increasing regulations. He authored the original 3D printer file for an AR-15 lower, and won his battle for, again, with the federal government to be able to distribute that file. He's now come out with what I think is you could call a 0% lower. And so in other words, instead of shipping a piece of metal that had been 80% of the way machined, his company will now ship a pure virgin piece of just a block of aluminum, basically, okay, with a milling machine that the consumer then basically presses a button, and it then cuts that machine down into a homemade receiver, which they're allowed to use. So Biden's proposal and his rule implementation, that's now the law of the land unless and until a judge strikes it down as being impermissible because it wasn't passed by Congress, and we'll see about that, has been already defeated before its implementation, Mark, by this new technology or this new product and service that Mr. Wilson has out there. And he says, according to an interview posted online, that he views this new rule as an elimination of his competition because he's the only one in the marketplace who's yet developed this way to go from a 0% finish to 100% finish.
Let's talk about the legality here of Joe Biden choosing to unilaterally change laws.
Yes,
with the stroke of a pen. As far as I'm aware, that's in this particular sphere, that's not constitutional to do so, is it? Or is that
well, if he gets away with it, is it constitutional? I mean, Donald Trump did the same thing with his bump stock regulations, let's recall. Yeah. This is a very popular, maybe popular is the wrong word. This is a way that presidents seem to be unable to avoid the temptation to try to enact new laws based not on the passage of Congress and their own signature, but just by moving a regulation.
So presumably, Scott, there are going to be some legal challenges here, but what strikes me as weird is that it doesn't seem that Congress is going to be challenging this law, seeing as it's their duty to propose and pass laws. What's going on with that?
Yes, well, sadly, the Congress and I can say without name calling, I think Democrats generally are not jealously guarding their right to make laws. The delegation of their lawmaking authority has, Republicans too, actually, they're both guilty of it on pretty wide bases. And liberty activists have long been frustrated by this because of the pace of which it allows regulations to pile up, and of course, without congressional input. So, the path for liberty is to favor congressionally made law rather than rulemaking by regulatory bodies. Mark, yeah.
Okay, and final question I want to get on to, Scott. Johnny Depp, Amber Heard.
Your favorite topic, Mark.
Why is this news? Why is this news? Why am I hearing so much about this?
Well, it's going to be a hugely covered trial because of the personal details that are going to be disclosed, and we don't bring it to the table for that, but merely the discussion of libel laws and why is this case being brought in the Virginia suburbs, for instance, right down the street from me, Mark, and it's because Virginia doesn't have what's called an anti-SLAPP lawsuit. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And these are lawsuits that people bring designed to basically shut someone up, okay? Many states have what are called anti-SLAPP lawsuits. And what that involves is a kind of mini trial or hearing before the case in chief to determine whether or not this is sort of like a good faith suit within the context of defamation litigation. And it basically allows people to defend themselves without spending a boatload of money. And Virginia doesn't have one. And that's why Johnny Depp brought his lawsuit in Virginia, where Ms. Heard, the defendant and now cross-complainant, has said she's never traveled once. So if you were wondering why it's in Virginia, that's why.
Well, Scott, better you than I to follow this particular story, as it's not on my radar at all. But thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.
I know you're a weak for all the celebrity litigation, Mark. That's why I brought it for you. Cheers.
And that's almost it for this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. My sincere thanks go out to our guests, Tim Donner, Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, and Scott D. Cosenza. And of course, you, the listeners, for taking the time to join us. One final thought before we wrap up. And Thomas Sowell once wrote, "When you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear." And we have platitudes from closet Marxists, politicians, and the chattering classes, all telling us what they want us to internalize, pushing the narrative that they want us to accept. The basic fact is that they're not doing this for us. They're doing it for them. The truth is often uncomfortable and controversial, and long may it always remain. Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.